Welcome to Mental Performance Unleashed with Emily Heird.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into an all new episode of Mental Performance Unleashed with Emily Heird, licensed psychotherapist and certified mental performance mastery coach. I am your host, Mike Leon. Emily here helps attorneys and other high performing professionals strengthen the mental systems that drive clarity, resilience, and sustainable results. In today's episode, we're talking about what it really means to achieve long term success without burning out. High performers, they're known for endurance and drive, but even the strongest systems can break down without recovery. Emily is going to explain how to recognize early warning signs, recalibrate, and sustain peak performance over time. Emily, it's good to see you as always. Let's start with that burnout part of this I just mentioned in the intro. Burnout gets mentioned a lot, but it could look different for different folks, especially high performers who keep pushing through the exhaustion part of this. How do you define burnout from a mental performance standpoint?
It's good to see you again, Mike. So from a mental performance standpoint, it's important to understand that burnout is not a motivation issue. It's not that you don't care anymore. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. Burnout is what happens when you have pushed your capacity beyond its limits for too long. So you can still be performing, you can still be hitting deadlines, still showing up, but you are running on fumes. And eventually, the systems can't keep up and your body will break down or your mental health will deteriorate. And so from a mental performance standpoint, burnout shows up as low cognitive energy. It's trouble focusing. Your work feels heavier. Your working memory starts to decline, so you forget things more easily. Your emotional bandwidth shrinks, so you're more irritable, you're more moody and tense, and even the simplest decisions are more challenging to make. And so it's important to understand that this is not a character flaw. It's not actually about how many hours you work, but it's that you've pushed your system too far for too long.
Are there some other signs, whether it be cognitively or physically, that show that someone's actually hit that wall?
So there are several things, and to share a few today, one would be that the brain really shifts into conservation mode. Burnout, you are lower on energy. You don't have that capacity that you need. And so decision making slows. It takes longer to get the same amount of work done. The prefrontal cortex starts to go offline faster. So you have less access to clarity and reasoning because you are in such a high stress state most of the time. And then as a result, your stress hormones are elevated, and this disrupts your sleep even more. Your mood is more labile, as we say in the psychological world, but it's more moody, I guess is the only way I can say it. And then your energy cycles are off. Glucose starts to get burned more quickly in your brain, so you have that mental fog. And so in this time, people might start to think, I just need to be more motivated. But this is actually your brain protecting itself and is trying to keep you alive. It's not focused on being maximally productive.
Emily, let me ask you then, what are some early indicators? Let's say to somebody who's listening to this, they have a bunch of employees, or even to somebody themselves that they feel like they're feeling this mental performance starting to decline, but they're getting the results like you mentioned on paper. What are some early indicators that people should look for then?
Well, a big one that I mentioned earlier was that it takes you longer to get the same amount of work done. You're putting in more effort. It's more strenuous, whereas before it felt easier, or you could be more efficient with that task. That would be an early warning sign. You notice little things where other people are irritating you more than they should or more than they used to. Maybe you start neglecting your sleep even more. So these recovery cues and recovery habits really start to drop off in the name of getting your tasks done and your work done. So your sleep gets off, maybe you start sacrificing your workouts, and there's little to no time for reflection and stepping back and checking in with yourself.
So Emily, let me piggyback on that. The high achievers, they treat the recovery part, like you just mentioned, sometimes as optional. Why is the recovery? Elaborate a little bit more on that. Why is the recovery such a critical part of this sustainable success?
So, a lot of high performers see recovery as laziness or as a weakness, or they fear if I take my foot off the pedal, everything's going to disappear. I'm going to stop being successful. But we need to reframe recovery as a biological requirement. As a cognitive athlete, your brain needs downtime to consolidate information. It needs downtime to continue solving those problems it's working on behind the scenes. You need movement and breath work to regulate blood flow to your brain and to your body. Sleep, you need that to reset your emotional and your cognitive baseline. And then pauses are going to reset that stress system, return you back to that parasympathetic state. So high performers think that they're actually saving time by just pushing through, but it's costing them. And recovery is the foundation to sustainable success. Elite athletes know that even a small drop in recovery shows up in their pace and form. For an endurance athlete, for example, they can finish the race, sure, but that second half of the race, that back half, is going to be ugly. It's going to take a lot longer. It's going to be a lot more of a slog to get through. And so this is what happens when professionals push through without resetting. You're dragging across the finish line, compensating and burning through way more energy than you should. Whereas if you integrate recovery, that second half of the race is going to be much easier.
Emily, what other structures and systems then can we put in place to help prevent the burnout before it starts?
So systems and structures are great because this means that you aren't relying on your willpower throughout the days and weeks to try to prevent burnout. We talk about the performer self and then the real self. And the real self needs to have all of its human needs met so that the performer self can perform at its best. So systems you can set up. This looks like having a daily success checklist. What does this look like in terms of movement, nutrition, sleep, hydration, pre-planning those things? It looks like setting boundaries around recovery time. So having a bedtime and sticking with it. It looks like planning out your time for your days and your weeks, having deep focused work. It may sound like I'm a broken record at some point on these podcasts, but it's really these core principles that are going to help you have that sustainable energy. It looks like automating and delegating information and tasks, leveraging technology to reduce administrative tasks. And then scheduling times, like, for example, I have a client in New York City who, she used to work until 11 p.m. every night or later and every single weekend. And so now we've scheduled in dinners with friends, Broadway shows, concerts, and athletic events. So she has those natural barriers to leave the office and then also have her human needs met.
If burnout's already set in for somebody that's listening to this, what's the most effective first step that they can take towards rebuilding the clarity and focus part?
So the first step is to have the awareness that burnout is here and recognizing I have a choice. I can either continue on the path that I'm on, and we know where that leads, or I can start to make a U-turn now and make small shifts in behaviors and habits. And this can look like on a daily basis, taking 2 to 5 minutes transition between tasks. So instead of being in that high urgency firefighter reactive mode all day, pausing and intentionally asking, okay, what's next? What gets my attention next? It looks like getting sunlight in the morning. That does a lot for our focus and our circadian rhythms and our overall mental health. It looks like taking blocks of time to do a nervous system reset, dial down that stress response throughout the day, whether that's deep breathing, movement, or non-sleep deep rest protocol. And then on a weekly basis, 10 to 15 minutes to kind of check in with your priorities and reset them, having disconnection from work, having a little bit of a vacation mindset for a short period of time on the weekend, and then kind of checking in for drains on your bandwidth, whether that's mental clutter, you're overcommitted, you're attending meetings that you can say no to, kind of really checking in on the demands on your bandwidth at the time.
And let me ask you, you mentioned client example before. Do you have some other client examples of ones that integrated the recovery without the feeling like they've lost the edge? And how did that work out for them?
So, scientifically, I can tell them, here's what the science says about recovery and how you are going to keep your edge. And then it is, let's do an experiment. And for example, one client decided to take a walk after work every single day. She put on her shoes before she left the office. She stopped at a park before she went home, and she walked for 20-25 minutes before she then transitioned into mom and home mode. And over a period of time, she saw she could feel a dramatic increase in lower stress, more energy, less irritability around her kids, and eventually like more motivation to kind of get back to work the next day. And that 25 minutes, which she normally would have done, is go home and sit on her couch and scroll on her phone.
Well, I don't know if we can help with the irritability around the kids, but so Emily, as we wrap here, for the professional out there who's maybe they've disregarded everything you just said, right? But they want to maintain the long-term performance angle of this. What's one, maybe let's say a mental habit or a principle that would help them turn the short burst of success, like we talked about earlier, into something more sustainable?
Yeah, so one strategy that I really love, which kind of sounds ridiculous, is to wildly celebrate every little thing that you are doing in terms of that identity that you want to build. So let's say you're working on a mental skill of focus. You want more focus, better focus at work. And so you set a timer for 10 minutes, 20 minutes of focused work. And at the end of that time period, when the timer goes off, you celebrate it. You're like, yes, Emily, fantastic job. This is how we do it. We stay focused and we get our work done. And the reason why this is effective is because our brain is a reward-based learning system. So when we celebrate every little thing and we integrate that into our identity and who we are, it actually releases dopamine and creates more motivation to continue to act and behave in that way. So we want to do more of it, and celebrating it feels fun, it feels good, and it's a mood booster.
Yeah, very well said. Emily, thank you as always for the time on this topic. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
And that's it for today's episode of Mental Performance Unleashed with Emily Heird. If you want to learn more about how Emily helps high-performing professionals strengthen their mental fitness, do me a favor, visit vantageviewcoaching.com today. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review and comment, or share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. As always, I'm Mike Leon. See everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.